Hello, and welcome back to Le Crime Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you're drawn to dark, haunting stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Story 1. If there's one thing I've always been drawn to, it's the way human consciousness can be shaped and controlled. I don't mean it in a cartoon villain way. I mean the real kind of manipulation. The kind that happens when the brain gets pushed into states it isn't built to handle. There are movies and stories that circle around the idea, like Limitless, Lucy, and The Long Dream. Limitless and Lucy both use the same basic hook, a drug that changes your brain. And the change can look like a gift until you realize what it costs. For a while now, I've been having dreams that don't feel like normal dreams. They don't fade when I wake up. They don't shrink into a few strange images and then disappear by breakfast. They feel long, not emotionally long, but literally long, like I have lived entire days inside them, sometimes weeks. The dream will start and I'll think, okay, here we go again. And then time stretches so far that I forget what it feels like to be awake. I'll go through routines. I'll get tired inside the dream. I'll get hungry. I'll feel boredom, stress, relief, all the things you feel during real time, except it's happening while my body is lying still somewhere else. The dreams themselves are never the same. They change completely, like someone is spinning a wheel and landing on a random reality. Sometimes they're simple, like being stuck in a familiar place. Sometimes they're so big and strange that I can't even describe them without sounding insane. But there's one thing that keeps repeating, one detail that makes my stomach tighten every time I notice it. Within the week leading up to one of these long dreams, I almost always took some kind of drug that grew naturally. Not a lab-made pill. Not something measured and packaged. Something that came from the ground. Something that people call natural. Like that word makes it safe. It could be a plant, a mushroom. Something dried and crushed. Something brewed into tea. Something someone hands you and says it's fine, it's just from nature. I'm not even talking about doing it constantly. Sometimes it's one time. Sometimes it's barely enough to feel. And still, a few days later, I'll fall asleep and it'll start again. I don't know if the drug is actually the cause, but it feels connected. It feels too consistent to ignore. And the worst part is the way it feels inside my body afterward, like the drug didn't just pass through me, like it stayed, like it took root. This is going to sound disgusting, but it's the closest comparison I have. It almost feels like it's growing inside me, like something alive that knows when I'm weakest, like it releases spores slowly, and those spores feed on me while I sleep. Not in a way that leaves marks on my skin, not something a doctor could point to and name, but in a way that leaves me hollow and heavy when I wake up, like something has been using my brain as a home. Back when the worst of this started, I was working at a local pizza place. Nothing special, just a normal job. The kind where you spend most of your time under bright lights, breathing in hot air and grease, trying to stay polite when customers act like. You're not a person. I worked a lot. Long shifts. Late closes. The place became familiar in that way that work does, where you know every sound and smell, every stain on the floor, every dent in the counter. One of the long dreams began there. In the dream, I was locked inside the pizza place after closing. At first, it didn't even scare me. It felt like a mistake that would get fixed soon, like someone would realize I was still there and come back with keys, laughing and apologizing. The lights were off except for the dull glow from signs and machines that never fully shut down. The air was stale, like old heat and cleaning chemicals. I walked around the empty dining area, listening to my footsteps. The kitchen was quiet. No ovens roaring, no fans, no voices. Just me and the hum of the building settling into night. Then I started noticing movement. People would rush past the windows outside, like shadows moving too fast. I'd turn my head and see figures in the dining area where there had been nothing a second ago. Regular customers. The same faces I saw every week. Some of them were sitting in booths, looking down at menus that weren't there. Some were standing at the counter, waiting to order. For a moment, I felt relieved, because if customers were here, that meant the store wasn't closed. That meant this was normal. I blinked, turned my head to look behind me, and the place was abandoned again. It kept happening. Someone would appear, like the dream was loading people in and out. My coworkers showed up next. They walked through the kitchen doing their usual motions, stretching dough, pulling trays, wiping counters, except they looked slightly wrong. Not in a dramatic monster way, more like a bad copy. Their faces were off by a few degrees. Their posture didn't match. Their voices, when they spoke, sounded like someone imitating them from memory. I tried talking to them. I tried asking what was going on, why the doors were locked, why nobody could hear me. But my words didn't land. They moved around me as if I was invisible. Minutes passed, and it felt like I was watching time speed up. I watched my coworkers leave, walking out like their shifts ended, and almost immediately they were replaced by other people I didn't recognize. New employees, new faces, new uniforms. The music in the background changed. The menu board changed. The prices changed. The posters changed. Then, the customers changed too. Different clothes, different haircuts, different phones. People started ordering things we didn't sell. Their slang shifted. The little habits of the world changed like someone was turning a dial, and it didn't stop. The shop aged in front of me. The tables were replaced. The floor tiles changed. The walls that used to be dark green were repainted, then repainted again. The lights were upgraded, then replaced. A new logo appeared on the front sign. Then, another. Every second felt like a month. That's the only way I can describe it. I'd look at my hands and they looked the same, but everything else kept moving forward without me. It made me feel unreal, like I wasn't part of the world anymore, just a witness stuck behind glass. I watched the pizza place shut down. I watched the for lease sign go up. I watched workers come in and tear it apart. I watched the ovens get dragged out like dead animals. I watched new walls go up, dividing the space into offices. In what felt like an instant, and also like years, the place was no longer a pizza shop. It was an insurance agency. I stood in the same spot I used to mop at the end of the night, and now there were desks and computers and dull posters about coverage plans. People in button-up shirts sat where customers used to eat. The smell of cheese and garlic was gone, replaced by stale air conditioning and printer ink. The speed didn't feel like a normal time lapse. It felt personal. It felt like time itself was leaning on me, pressing me flatter, forcing me to watch. I remember thinking, in a confused, almost detached way, that this must be what it feels like to be a god watching a world evolve. Not a powerful god, not a god who can change anything. A god trapped in one location, forced to watch progress like it's a punishment. I tried to leave. I walked toward the door, and each step felt wrong. Every footfall boomed with a strange echo, like the sound stretched longer than it should. My body felt heavy, but not physically heavy. More like the air was thick with time, like every movement had to push through layers of years. And as I walked, the building changed again. The walls began to expand outward. The once dark green walls from the original pizza place were gone now, and what replaced them was smooth, modern white. The hallway in front of me extended. It didn't end where it should have. They kept going, stretching farther every time I blinked, like the building was unfolding in front of me. A never-ending hallway, clean, bright, empty, no doors, no windows, just that endless, sterile white. Panic finally hit me in a clear way. Not confusion, not curiosity, real fear. I did what you do in a nightmare when you've had enough. I closed my eyes hard, squeezed them shut, tried to force myself awake. I told myself it was a dream. I told myself my body was in bed. I told myself I could wake up if I tried hard enough. When I opened my eyes, I expected my bedroom. I expected darkness and the familiar shapes of furniture. I expected the relief of waking. Instead, I saw my home planet, or what was left of it. I wasn't standing in the hallway anymore. I wasn't in any building at all. I don't even know where I was. It felt like I was suspended in a place where up and down didn't matter. In front of me was Earth, and it was being eaten. Not by fire, not by darkness, by nothing. That's the only word that fits, and even that word feels useless. It wasn't black, it wasn't a shadow, it wasn't a void full of dark. It was nothing, as if existence itself was being erased. No sun, no moon, no atmosphere, no stars, no sound, no particles, not even emptiness, because emptiness still implies space. This was the removal of space, the removal of matter, the removal of the idea that anything was ever there. The planet was being devoured from one side, slowly, like rot spreading, except it wasn't rot. It was deletion. It was the universe forgetting. For me, it was slow enough to watch, slow enough to understand what I was seeing, but I could also tell that for the beings on the planet, if any were still alive, it would feel like an even slower doom. The kind you can't run from because the concept of where is being taken away. I felt sick, but I didn't have a body the way I usually do. It was like fear was happening to me without needing organs to process it. When the last piece of Earth vanished, there was no dramatic final moment. It just wasn't there anymore, and my mind struggled to accept that. Like trying to imagine a color you've never seen. Then it happened, a giant explosion. Not like any explosion I've ever seen in a movie. The light filled my entire view. It wasn't one color. It was every color, including ones I don't think humans are meant to recognize. It was like being flashbanged by reality itself. And I changed. I can't explain it cleanly, but in that moment, I felt myself transform into something new. Not a person, not a human mind inside a human skull. More like I became pure matter spread across everything. Like I was no longer looking at the universe, but woven into it. Suddenly, Earth wasn't seen through my eyes. Earth was seen through everything. Through every drop of water, every blade of grass, every nerve inside every animal, every cell splitting, every stone cracking. I was everywhere at once, and because of that, I saw everything that ever happened. I watched the start of humanity, every first breath, every first step, every desperate struggle and small victory. I saw every act of reproduction, every birth, every death, every murder, every kindness. I felt it as if it was happening to me. And it didn't happen once. It repeated, like a rerun of a show you didn't choose to watch. Over and over, the universe reset. The Big Bang happened again. History unfolded again. I watched it again from inside everything. At first, the loop took a long time, like the full length of existence. Then, it sped up. Each time the Big Bang happened, I grew more aware, like the repetition wasn't just showing me the same thing, but mutating me, changing my ability to perceive, expanding what my mind could hold. It felt like my genes, if that word even applies, were being rewritten constantly, forcing me to understand more than I ever wanted. By the 8th run, it was happening in minutes. Minutes. I spoke every word ever spoken, not just hearing language, but producing it, feeling it pass through mouths that weren't mine. I felt every emotion, not as an idea, but as a direct flood. Joy, shame, rage, love, terror. The quiet despair of someone staring at a ceiling at 3 a.m., the sudden relief of someone forgiven, the emptiness of someone who has stopped caring. I felt broken bones. I felt broken minds. Billions of them every second, stacked on top of each other, until pain wasn't an event anymore. It was the air, and the loop kept going. It became impossible to measure time in any normal way, because time itself was part of what I was trapped inside. It didn't feel like days or years. It felt like I was being forced through an endless recycling machine that ground reality down and printed it again, and each time it printed, I had to live it. Now I'm writing this, and I don't know what now means anymore. I don't know if this is me awake at a keyboard, or me dreaming about being awake, or me inside another loop where I'm trying to leave a message in a place that might not even exist. What I do know is that I have seen the compassion and the hatred of humanity more times than I can handle. I've watched people save each other, and I've watched them destroy each other, and I've felt all of it like it was my own blood. In the past, I didn't have much compassion for humanity. I was cynical. I thought people were mostly selfish and stupid, and I kept my distance emotionally because it felt safer. But after living through humanity over and over, compassion is all I have left. It's the only thing that still feels real. It's the only thing that doesn't turn into static. As I'm writing this, I'm on rerun number 87,116,374 of this messed up show. The words you're reading are an echo. They're the best version of a common language I can form, and I'm trying to spread it anywhere I can, like shouting into a crowded room and hoping one person turns their head. If there is someone who can help me, please do. I don't know if this is a dream. I don't know if it's a drug. I don't know if something is growing inside me and using sleep as a doorway. I don't know if I've broken my brain in a way that can't be fixed. All I know is that I'm stuck, and I'm tired. And I have lived your lives more times than you've lived them yourselves. Please, if someone can see this, help me. Story 2. I love being alone. I wake up to morning light spilling through my window, soft and gentle, like it's careful not to disturb me. The house is still in a way that feels protective. The air holds a quiet warmth, and with it comes that steady feeling of safety. When I'm alone, there's no need to perform, no need to explain myself, no need to wear a version of me that fits someone else's expectations. I can just exist. Every morning, a songbird outside my window sings like it has an appointment with my day. The sound is light and simple, but it's so familiar that it feels like part of the house itself. It doesn't blast or demand attention. It just drifts in and reminds me that time is moving forward in a calm, predictable way. I let the song pull me into my routine. I stretch slowly, feeling the stiffness in my body loosen a little. Then I take my time with a quiet meditation while my little morning companion finishes his tune. I've always liked the way those minutes feel, like a clean page before anything else happens. After that comes my favorite part, the part that makes the whole morning feel official. I reach for my coffee mug. It's not a perfect mug. It's a little uneven, handmade, with 1 or 2 small chips that prove it's been used and loved instead of hidden in a cabinet. I made it while I was studying abroad. I remember shaping it with my hands, trying to get it smooth, not caring too much when it came out with small flaws, because I wasn't making it to impress anyone. I was making it for me. Its color is what I love most. A deep indigo that seems to catch light in a way other blues can't. It's not the kind of color you find in stores. It feels rare, like it belongs to a specific memory and nowhere else. Because of that, it feels uniquely mine, like I couldn't replace it even if I tried. I fill it with coffee and let the bitterness settle me. I hold it with both hands and feel the heat seep into my fingers. Then, when I'm ready, I disappear into the worlds I create for the rest of the day. I write, I build stories, I shape people who don't exist in places that never were, and I love every second of it because it feels like control. It feels like freedom. This is comfort. This is home. This is enough. The next morning, I tell myself the same thing. I like being alone. The day starts the way it usually does. Light through the window. The quiet house. That familiar feeling that nothing can reach me here. But something is different. It's subtle at first, like the difference between a normal afternoon and the kind of afternoon that ends in a storm. The same shapes are there, but the color feels slightly off. The warmth isn't as complete. I stay in bed longer than I mean to, waiting for the songbird to start. I listen closely, expecting that first soft note to float in and tug me into my routine. Nothing comes. The silence throws me off more than it should. I keep listening anyway, like if I wait long enough, the sound will return. But the window stays quiet. No melody, no fluttering rhythm, just still air and the distant hum of a world that feels farther away than usual. It's been getting colder, I think. Maybe he flew somewhere warmer. Maybe he moved on for the season. That makes sense. Birds do that. They leave and come back. They disappear for a while and return like nothing happened. Maybe he'll come back. I get up eventually, trying to shake off the strange feeling that comes with missing a sound you didn't realize you depended on. I stretch toward the ceiling, reaching until my spine complains, hoping it will pull the tension out of me. My shoulders loosen, but the quiet remains. I sit down to meditate, expecting it to smooth the edges of my thoughts. It helps a little, but my mind keeps drifting back to the empty space outside the window. I keep picturing the bird, alone somewhere, trying to survive cold air and hunger. Wherever he is, I hope he's safe. I don't let myself spiral too far. I tell myself that routine is the anchor, and I cling to it like a habit. The best part comes last, like it always does. I reach for my favorite indigo mug. I make my coffee. I hold the warmth in my hands. But when I turn the mug slightly, I see it. There's another chip. A small one, fresh and pale against the indigo glaze. I run my thumb over it automatically, feeling the rough edge, feeling the way it interrupts the smooth curve. I try to remember dropping it, bumping it, anything that would explain the new damage. I can't. I stare at it for a moment longer than I should. It bothers me in a way I can't quite explain. It's still my mug. It's still here. But something about that new chip makes me feel like time is moving without asking me first. I set it down carefully. I really need to be more careful with it. I look around my house at the familiar walls, the familiar furniture, the familiar quiet, and I try to settle back into the feeling I had yesterday. This is my home. This is what I want. The next day, the cold is worse. It doesn't feel like a cool morning anymore. It feels like midwinter, the kind that gets into your joints. The sunlight is still there, I can see it. I can see the rays through the window, pale and distant, like someone turned the brightness down. It's almost like the light exists, but it can't fully touch me. Like it's just out of reach. The silence is still there too. It isn't peaceful now. It's heavy. It sits on the house like weight. It aches, like pressure in your ears before you realize you're holding your breath. I lie in bed for what feels like hours, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the normal parts of the day to show up and rescue me. I keep expecting the bird to start singing at any moment, as if the sound itself could reset everything back to the way it's supposed to be. It never does. After a long time, I force myself to stand. I tell myself I'm being dramatic, that I'm just tired, that I'm coming down with something. Maybe I'm getting sick. That would explain the way the world feels dimmer, the way the house seems a little farther away from me than it should. I stretch again, slow and deliberate, hoping movement will shake the heaviness loose. It doesn't. My body moves, but the weight stays. It's not pain exactly. It's more like the feeling you get when you realize you've forgotten something important, but you can't remember what. That anxious blank spot that makes your chest tight. I sit down to meditate again, stubbornly, like if I follow the steps the right way, the universe will reward me with normal. I close my eyes. I breathe. I try to find the quiet center I always find. But my mind won't settle. Thoughts splinter apart as soon as I touch them. Images flash too quickly to hold. I keep getting pulled towards something I can't name, like my brain is trying to warn me without having the language to do it. The more I try to focus, the worse it gets, until meditation stops being calming and starts feeling like staring down into deep water. So I stop. I open my eyes and the room looks the same, but it doesn't feel the same. The corners seem darker. The air feels thinner. The house feels less like a shelter and more like a container. I tell myself coffee will help. Coffee always helps. I reach for the indigo mug without looking, completing the ritual like muscle memory. My arm extends. My hand opens, ready to wrap around the ceramic. My fingers close on nothing. I freeze. I look down, confused, certain I missed it by an inch. I reach again, slower this time, scanning the counter and the table and the nearby shelf where I sometimes set it down. It's not there. I start checking the sink, the cabinet, the dishwasher, the spot beside the kettle, the small table in the corner. I search the usual places first, then the unusual ones, and when I still don't find it, I begin checking places it has never been. My heart starts beating faster, and I don't understand why I'm reacting this way. It's just a mug. I could buy another mug. I could buy a dozen mugs, but I can't buy that mug. I stand in the center of the kitchen, arms hanging at my sides, staring at the empty space where it should be. It feels like something has been taken from my life without permission, not stolen by a person, removed by the world itself. The cold presses against my skin. The silence presses against my thoughts. I swallow and whisper, mostly to myself, "Where did you go?" There's no answer. The next day, I don't tell myself I like being alone. I don't even pretend. I am alone. Not the kind of alone that feels like peace. Not the kind I chose. This is something else. This is the kind of alone that has teeth. Nothing is the same. There are no birds, no distant city sounds, no soft morning rhythm. The light is gone too, or maybe it's still there somewhere, but it no longer reaches my room. My windows show only gray emptiness, like the outside world has been washed clean of detail. No warmth, only silence, only myself. At first, I try to act normal. I try to do the steps anyway, like a person repeating a prayer. I get out of bed. I stretch. I sit quietly. But it feels pointless, like the actions belong to someone else's life and I'm just copying them. Eventually, I do the thing I've never had to do before. I try to leave. I walk to the front door, my hand trembling slightly as it hovers over the lock. I tell myself this is ridiculous. I tell myself I'm having some kind of breakdown. I tell myself fresh air will fix it. I open the door. Or I try to. The door doesn't move. It isn't locked. It isn't stuck the way wood swells in humidity. It's something else. Something absolute, like the door has become part of the wall, like the idea of outside no longer connects to it. I put both hands on it and push harder. My shoulders strain. My breath comes sharp through my nose. Nothing. step back, stare at it, then try again. I try the handle. I try the deadbolt. I try the chain. I try everything, even though I know, logically, it should open. It should. It doesn't. I try a window next. The one in the living room that I know sticks sometimes. I put my fingers under the frame, pull, shove. It won't budge. Panic rises fast, hot in my chest, and for a second I can't breathe. I force myself to slow down, to think. Maybe it's a dream. Maybe I'm asleep. Maybe I'm still in bed and this is just my mind doing something strange. I pinch myself, hard. It hurts. I slap my own cheek, just to be sure. Tears spring into my eyes from the sting, and that makes the fear worse because pain should wake you up. That's what people say. Pain should wake you up. It doesn't. I try leaving again. I try the back door. Same result. I try the bathroom window. Same. I try the bedroom window. Same. I tried to leave once. I couldn't. I tried to leave 100 times more. I couldn't. Each attempt chips away at something in me. Like every failure takes a little piece of my certainty, my sense that reality has rules. And when enough of those pieces are gone, what's left is raw fear, the kind that sits in your stomach and doesn't let go. A piece of me is gone. I can feel it, not metaphorically. I mean, it feels like something has been removed, like I'm missing a part of myself that used to connect me to the world. The bird is gone. The mug is gone. The light is gone. The outside is gone. And now I'm starting to understand that maybe those weren't random losses. Maybe they were steps. This place is not my home. It has my furniture, my walls, my memories tucked into drawers and shelves. But it doesn't feel like my home anymore. It feels like a copy of it. A version made to keep me calm while something else happens. A set built to look real until you notice the seams. It's like I was dreaming, but I fell through the bottom of the dream and landed somewhere that only looks familiar from far away. I'm alone, and now I don't want to be. I can't even believe I'm writing that, because being alone was always the point. It was my comfort, my choice, my safe place. I built my life around it because it made sense to me. Because other people felt loud and unpredictable and exhausting, and this quiet house felt like the only place I could breathe. But this isn't quiet. This is empty. There's a difference, and I didn't understand it until now. The silence isn't soothing anymore. It's a pressure that keeps building, like the house is waiting for something, like the world is holding its breath with me trapped inside it. I stand in the middle of my living room and listen as hard as I can, trying to catch any sign that something exists beyond these walls. A car passing, a neighbor's voice, a dog barking, a plane overhead. Anything, nothing, just the sound of my own breathing and the soft, terrifying beat of my heart. Someone, help. I don't want to be alone anymore. Story 3. A couple of years ago, I saw a guy in a jester costume while I was walking home. It wasn't scary, not at first. It was just awkward in a very specific way, like seeing someone try too hard in public and not knowing where to look. The outfit was loud and colorful, the kind of thing that makes you feel embarrassed on someone else's behalf. He stood near the sidewalk, holding a thick stack of leaflets and trying to hand them to people who were doing everything they could to avoid eye contact. Most of them sped up the moment they noticed him, like he was about to ask for money or pull them into a street performance they didn't want to be part of. I almost did the same. I was tired, I wanted to get home, and I didn't feel like being dragged into anything. But as I passed him, he stepped directly in front of me and held one of the leaflets out, blocking my path. Hey, step right in, he said in a goofy voice. The fun starts when you arrive at Blue Carnival Island. I frowned at him. And I guess my face said enough because his expression changed immediately. He dropped the voice like flipping a switch. "Sorry," he said quickly. "I know it looks weird. If I don't hit a sign-up quota, they'll make me wear the hat too." Then he actually cringed, like even thinking about the hat was painful. I looked down at the leaflet he'd handed me. The paper was glossy and bright. The title was huge. Blue Carnival Island Experience. Sponsored by. Under the title was the logo of an energy company. Clean and modern, totally out of place next to the carnival theme. "A holiday?" I asked, still suspicious. "Yeah," he said, and this time he smiled in a way that looked normal, not performative. He still seemed embarrassed, like he was hoping I wouldn't make him keep talking in costume. "A group trip package. Flights, accommodation, the whole thing. It's actually really good, to be honest. You don't sound convincing," I told him. He let out a short laugh, then winced. "I'm better when people don't look directly at me," he said. "Ruins the illusion." That got me. I laughed, and the laugh surprised me because I hadn't meant to. He wasn't being creepy. He wasn't being pushy. He looked like a guy stuck doing something humiliating because his job required it. Then we kept talking, right there on the street, for longer than I expected. It started as jokes about the costume and the quota and the stupid hat, but it kept going. He had this easy way of talking, like he wasn't trying to impress me. He was just there, being himself, grateful I wasn't treating him like a nuisance. That night, we started texting. His name was Matt. He was simple to talk to in a way that felt rare. At first, it was mostly jokes about how ridiculous his job was. Then, it turned into longer messages. We talked about movies, hobbies, bad bosses, weird childhood stories, and the tiny details of everyday life that you don't usually tell people unless you trust them. A few days later, we met up again in town. He wasn't wearing the costume, and I realized immediately that without the makeup and powder and bright colors, he was actually good-looking. Not in a perfect model way, just naturally, like someone you'd notice without meaning to. We got lunch and talked for a long time. It felt comfortable, like we'd already known each other longer than we had. When we were finishing up, he asked if I'd thought any more about the trip. "I do need to get paid, remember," he said, grinning. "No pressure," I rolled my eyes. "Of course." We joked about it for a while, but eventually I asked for the real details, because at that point I was curious. He explained the flights, the schedule, the accommodations, the whole package. It sounded almost too organized, the kind of thing where they plan everything for you so you don't have to think. Then he said something that stuck with me. "I get a bonus if the group stays together," he said. And he scratched at the side of his neck like he wasn't sure whether he should have said that part. "That's kind of their whole thing," he added. "It's a structured experience." The way he said it was careful, like he was trying to make it sound normal, but he didn't fully believe it himself. I assumed it was just one of those guided, all-inclusive trips where everyone stays at the same hotel, does the same activities, takes the same photos. The kind of thing that's designed to be easy and social and safe. A week later, I signed up. My friends Chloe and Tyler were coming too, mostly because I pushed them into it. I told them it would be fun. I told them it would be a story. I told them we could post pictures and laugh about it afterward over drinks, like it was just another impulsive plan. When we arrived at the bus station, I was surprised by how many people were there. Around 60 of us, maybe more. Families with kids, couples holding hands, a few older people who looked excited and a little nervous, people with matching luggage and travel pillows, and those bright expressions people get when they think they're about to step out of their ordinary lives for a bit. Matt showed up in full costume again, bouncing between groups, high-fiving kids, joking with parents, hyping everyone up like he was the host of the happiest event on earth. It was ridiculous, but it worked. People laughed. The kids loved him. It all felt like harmless fun. Then he caught my eye across the crowd and smiled, and for a second the noise around me felt far away. It was the same face, but the smile wasn't part of the act. It felt real. "Sarah," he said when he got close, "you made it." "Of course," I said. "I'm your best recruit," he scoffed. "Not even remotely true, but I'll pretend it is." Before we boarded, he gathered everyone together, clapping his hands lightly to get attention. "All right, everyone, just one thing," he said. "When we get there, it's really important you stay with the group. Don't wander off on your own." People made little noises, some joking, some annoyed. Someone called out, "Why?" Matt hesitated. Not long, but long enough that I noticed. "Wouldn't want anyone getting lost," he said, and smiled again like that was all it was. The first part of the trip felt normal, busy, but normal. It stayed normal until Amsterdam. That's where everything shifted. The flight to the island was delayed overnight. It wasn't a small delay either. It turned into a sudden change in plans that should have caused chaos. People were tired. Kids were cranky. A few people started complaining loudly. I expected the whole group to fall apart the way groups do when travel goes wrong. But Matt handled it instantly. He booked hotels, reorganized transportation, moved people like chess pieces, kept everyone calm, kept everyone moving. It was impressive in a way that didn't match the awkward guy I'd met on the street. It was like watching someone step into a role they'd practiced. Chloe joked that he should quit and get a real job. Matt laughed like it was nothing. At the hotel, it felt like a temporary inconvenience. People drank in the lobby and tried to treat it like a bonus vacation night. The mood was almost fun again. I went to see Matt. His room was strange in how empty it was. No suitcase open on the bed, no clothes thrown over a chair, no scattered toiletries in the bathroom. Just a single bag sitting neatly on a chair, like he was prepared to leave at any second. "You travel light," I said. "I don't stay in one place long," he replied with a grin. At the time, I laughed. It sounded like a flirty line. We talked in his room until the sun went down. It felt like a quiet pocket of normal in the middle of travel noise. Then that night, I woke up to knocking on my hotel door. Not casual knocking, loud, urgent knocking, the kind that makes your whole body go tense before you're fully awake. I opened the door, still half asleep, blinking into the hallway light. Matt stood there, but he didn't look like himself. No costume, no smile. His face was pale, his jaw tight, his eyes sharp and alert like he hadn't slept. "You need to leave," he said. It took me a second to understand the words. "What?" "I've booked you on a flight," he said, and his voice didn't shake, but it sounded strained, like he was forcing the calm. "It leaves in an hour. You need to go. Now." He shoved a plane ticket into my hand. I stared at it, then back at him. "Matt, what are you talking about? What about everyone else?" "I'll handle it." "No," I said. "No, you're not answering me. What's going on?" He stepped closer. He looked right into my eyes, and he shook his head slowly, like he was begging me to stop asking. "Sarah, I don't have time to explain," he said. "You just have to trust me. Then tell Chloe and Tyler. I said I'll handle it." The hallway went quiet around us. I could hear my own heartbeat. He looked at me like he was trying to memorize my face, like he was afraid he wouldn't get another chance. Then he kissed me. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't slow. It was desperate, like he was trying to pour an apology into me without words. "Just please go," he said, quieter now. I wish I could tell you I argued. I wish I could say I demanded the truth, refused to move, forced him to explain. I didn't. Something about him was different. The joking Matt was gone. The awkward smile was gone. What was left was a man who looked terrified and was trying to keep it from showing. So I packed quickly with shaking hands. My hotel room suddenly felt unfamiliar, like it wasn't mine, like I'd woken up in the wrong place. Every sound in the hallway made me flinch. The elevator felt too slow. The lobby felt too bright. The world kept acting normal around me, and that made it worse. The airport was bright and ordinary, full of people buying snacks and dragging luggage and complaining about Wi-Fi. I moved through it as fast as I could. I checked my phone every few minutes, waiting for Matt to message me, to explain, to say anything that made sense. Nothing came. On the flight home, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face at my door. The tightness around his eyes, like he was holding back panic. I kept replaying the moment, trying to find what he hadn't said, trying to pull meaning from the shape of his silence. When I got home, my family asked why I was back early. I told them I felt sick and decided to cancel. It was the easiest lie. The kind people accept because it fits into a normal world. I texted Chloe and Tyler too, telling them the same thing. My hands shook as I typed. For a moment I worried they wouldn't respond, and my mind went straight into worst-case thoughts. But a day later they both replied, telling me to feel better soon. A few days after that, Chloe texted again. Made it. Island was amazing. You missed out. Hope you're feeling better now. I stared at the message until my eyes hurt. Everything seemed normal. Chloe and Tyler came back, and they talked about the trip like it was exactly what it was supposed to be. Tyler showed me pictures. Chloe joked about the food. They complained about the sunburn and the group activities and the cheesy entertainment. They sounded like themselves. But Matt hadn't looked normal that night. Not even close. For a while, I tried to leave it alone. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what to make of it. Matt and I stopped texting after that night, and I didn't reach out either. I wouldn't have known what to say. Are you okay? Why did you freak out? Did you lie to me? Did you save me? What does that even mean? Chloe and Tyler asked about him sometimes. They teased me. They asked if it was a holiday fling. I brushed it off and changed the subject. I didn't have a story to give them that wouldn't make me sound unstable. Then, a few weeks later, I started noticing small things about Chloe that felt wrong. Nothing big, nothing I could prove, just tiny moments that didn't fit. She laughed at strange times. She forgot details she would normally remember easily. I only noticed because I'd known her for years. When you know someone long enough, you can feel when the rhythm of them changes, even if you can't explain it. Tyler's change was clearer. He was still Tyler, but quieter, flatter. Like someone had turned the volume down on his personality. He smiled less. He spoke slower. He seemed present, but not fully there. One day I brought up something that had happened years ago. Something the three of us had been there for. A shared memory. One of those stories that usually comes with laughter and specific details. Chloe hesitated. Then she smiled and said, "Oh yeah, that." But it wasn't right. It wasn't how she used to remember things. There was no spark behind it, no natural flow of the story. It was like she knew she was supposed to agree. So she did. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. I told myself people change, people forget. People get tired. Life happens. Weeks passed. Then months. Nothing obvious happened, nothing dramatic enough to point at and say, "There, that's proof." Until one night at Chloe's. We were in her kitchen, cooking like we used to, moving around each other like we'd done 100 times. She was talking about something, but I wasn't really listening. I was watching her instead, and I didn't like that I had been doing that lately. Watching my best friend like she was a puzzle I couldn't solve. Mid-sentence, she faltered. Just slightly. She repeated a word, like her brain had skipped and she was trying to catch up. I started to ask if she was okay. And then her eyes rolled back. Not like someone fainting. Not like someone blinking hard. They spun up fast, wrong and mechanical, until all I could see was white. Pure white. Two blank whites staring straight through me. I screamed. It was instinct. I didn't choose it. It ripped out of me like I'd touched fire. And then it stopped. Her eyes snapped back into place. She blinked a few times, confused, like she'd only lost a second. "Sarah," she said, startled. "Oh my gosh. You okay?" I couldn't speak. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I took a step back without meaning to, like my body was trying to create distance from something it didn't understand. I thought. I started, and then stopped. Because what was I supposed to say? Your eyes turned into a dead white mask and looked through me like I wasn't there? After a few moments, Chloe laughed. She said she felt dizzy for a second, probably low blood sugar. She acted normal. The kitchen lights buzzed softly. The stove kept heating the pan. The world kept being ordinary. So I nodded and pretended I accepted it. We went back to cooking. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I knew I hadn't imagined it. And deep down, I already knew there was only one person who might be able to explain what I'd seen. I called Matt that night. It had been months since Amsterdam. I was surprised he even answered. When he did, his voice was cautious, guarded. At first he tried to avoid it. He asked if I was sure. He suggested I might have been tired. He sounded like someone trying to steer a conversation away from a cliff, but something in my voice must have made it clear I wasn't going to drop it. There was a pause. Then he sighed. "Can we meet?" he asked. "I'll explain properly." He came over later that evening. No jokes, no small talk. The moment he stepped inside, I turned to him. "What happened on that island?" I asked. He sat down, and for a second he didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, too calm. "Do you believe there are other versions of you, Sarah?" he asked. "Not really," I said, because what else was I supposed to say? "That's fair," he replied. "Most people don't." He watched me carefully, like he was trying to see how far he could go before I shut down. But there are versions where your life goes differently, depending on the decisions you make, right? He continued. "I guess," I said slowly. "Sure." He nodded. "Some changes are small. Different haircut, different job. Others are bigger. Different city, different life." I frowned, but I didn't interrupt. "And some of those versions of you are not okay," he said. My skin went cold. "They're suffering," Matt continued, and his tone stayed steady in a way that made it worse. "In ways you can't imagine." "Matt," I said, my voice tightening, "why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to understand what I did," he said. "What you did," I repeated. He met my eyes. "The island," he said quietly, "is where they switch people." The room felt silent in a new way, like even the air paused. I waited for him to laugh. I waited for him to say he was messing with me, that this was some strange attempt at drama. He didn't. "The version of you that goes there doesn't come back," he said. My mouth went dry. "That's not funny." His face didn't change. "I know." My voice went smaller. "Then where are they?" "Somewhere worse," he said. "Much worse." "And the people who come back?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "They're from those other places," he said. "Not just any of them. The versions that have suffered the most." My stomach turned. "No. They take different versions of them from other timelines and swap them," he continued. "Then they replace their memories so it all fits. So their lives keep moving like nothing happened." I shook my head. "That's insane." "I know," he said again, like the words didn't even touch him. I stood there frozen, trying to put the pieces together. Chloe's hesitation, Tyler's flatness, the wrong laughter, the missing details, the eyes turning white, like something inside her had slipped. But why? I asked. Matt looked away for a second, like he was choosing how much truth to give me. Because every time it happens, he said, it generates energy. A lot of it. More than anything else they found. My throat tightened. So you work for them? He nodded once. Why would you tell me? My voice cracked. Why would you tell me any of this? Because I couldn't send you there, he said. That hit harder than the rest. For a moment he didn't speak. Then he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. I wasn't always part of it, he said. A few years ago, I was backpacking in Thailand. One night I got taken. Wrong place, wrong time. I didn't know who they were. I only remember pain and blood and screaming, and it went on for weeks. Every day, morning to night. He paused, staring at the floor like he was seeing it again. And then one day it stopped, he said. Not slowly, all at once. I woke up somewhere else. Clean. No injuries, no pain. Where? I asked. A facility, he said. Rooms full of people, unconscious, lying on beds. I thought it was a hospital at first. He shook his head. Someone came over and explained it like it was normal, he continued. They said those people were being processed. Memories replaced so they'd match the versions of themselves from this world. I couldn't look away from him. They told me what happened, he said, that I'd been switched. The version of me that belonged here had gone to the island for the holiday. I took his place. My voice sounded far away. And they just told you that? They didn't care if I believed it, he said. They gave me a choice. He paused again, and when he spoke next, it sounded like he hated the words. I could have my memories replaced like everyone else, live this version of my life like nothing ever happened. Or I could keep my memories and know the truth. And you chose, I said. I chose to remember, he answered. But it came with a condition. He rubbed his forehead like it hurt. I had to work for them, he said. Recruitment. 10 people minimum every cycle. Why you? I asked. I asked the same thing, he said. They told me I scored high on emotional intelligence and communication, that I was stable enough to function after what I'd been through. He gave a small, humorless smile. Apparently that's rare. My mind flashed back to the first time I saw him. The awkwardness, the little hesitations, the way he tried to make jokes to soften things. I used to think it was charming. Now I wondered how much of it was real and how much of it was survival. And if you don't meet the quota? I asked. If I don't meet it, he said, I'm fired. The word sounded wrong in this context, like he was talking about losing a retail job, not something like this. That means they wiped my memories, he continued. Replaced them with the ones from the version of me that was here, the one who was sent to Thailand in my place. Silence spread between us, thick and ugly. So either I do this, he said quietly, or I let them take it all away and go back to not knowing, like your friends. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. Chloe pausing over memories she should have had instantly. Tyler reacting just a little too late. The small wrongness in their faces that I kept denying because the alternative was impossible. They weren't them. I was looking at something wearing their faces, carrying their stories, moving through their lives like it belonged there, while the real Chloe and Tyler were somewhere else. Somewhere worse. Somewhere Matt didn't want to describe. And it was my fault. I had convinced them to go. If Matt hadn't come to my door that night, if he hadn't forced a ticket into my hand, if he hadn't looked at me like he was saying goodbye, that would have been me too. The guilt settled into my chest like a stone. And then another thought followed it, colder than the first. If you don't meet the quota, I said slowly, then your memories are replaced. That would make me the only one who knew. And even then, what would that change? If they could do this to anyone, if they could rewrite memories and drop replacements into lives like puzzle pieces, what could I do with the truth? I thought about telling my family. I thought about telling the versions of Chloe and Tyler walking around with my friends' faces. I thought about telling anyone at all. But I already knew how it would sound. Like a breakdown, like paranoia, like a story someone writes for attention. No one would believe me. I looked at Matt. How many people? I asked. How many have been switched? I don't know, he said. Then he looked directly at me. But it's more than you think. That was the last time we talked about it in such a direct way. After that, it became something we didn't touch unless we had to. Like a bruise you avoid pressing because you already know how much it hurts. Life kept moving. It always does. Eventually, Matt and I ended up together. Not because it was easy, but because it felt impossible not to. If I'm honest, I didn't feel safe without him anymore. He was the only person who understood what I'd seen, the only person who could confirm I wasn't imagining the cracks in reality. We still go to work. We still see friends. We still make plans. On the surface, life looks normal, and sometimes it almost feels normal again, especially on days when Chloe laughs in a way that sounds almost right, or when Tyler makes a joke that feels like the old hymn for half a second. Sometimes my brain tries to relax, tries to accept the version of the world that's easiest to live in. But then, Matt comes home in that jester costume, and my stomach tightens every time I see it. It doesn't look silly anymore. It doesn't look funny. It looks like a uniform. As long as he meets that sales quota, nothing changes. That's the rule that holds our lives together. He keeps recruiting. He keeps smiling. He keeps the group moving. He keeps the trip structured. He keeps the island fed. He's still my Matt. The same one I met on the street with a stack of leaflets, apologizing for the costume and joking about the stupid hat. And he'll keep meeting the quota. He has to. Story 4. I'd had a messy night. That's the whole reason I ended up at the supermarket in the first place. Nothing dramatic at the time, at least not in my head. Just a problem that needed fixing and the kind of supplies you can only buy in a place that stays open late. Bleach, trash bags, paper towels, maybe something to cover a smell I didn't want to think too hard about. What's almost funny, looking back, is that I sat in my car for a long time before I went in. 20 minutes, maybe 30. I didn't even have music on. I just stared out the windshield, watching people come and go, working up the will to get out of the driver's seat. It wasn't fear, exactly. More like I was trying to convince my body to move while my mind kept drifting away from the task. If I'd gone inside right away, I might not have seen him. He could have already moved on, tapping his cane down the sidewalk, turning his attention to someone else. He might have been halfway down the block, ready to start his next sermon for a new set of shoppers who didn't ask for it. I could have slipped in, bought what I needed, and gone home without anything changing. But the longer I waited, the more it felt like the timing didn't belong to me anymore. Like I could have gone in immediately or waited 2 more hours and it wouldn't have mattered. Like the moment was set and I was just being guided toward it, the way a tide pulls whatever is floating on the surface. When I finally got out of the car, the air felt colder than it should have. The parking lot lights were too bright, bleaching everything into sharp colors. I remember looking at the automatic doors ahead and thinking I should just get it over with. Walk in, grab what I needed, leave. Then I saw him. He was standing near the entrance, turned slightly toward a couple who looked trapped in that polite way people get when they don't know how to end a conversation. The kind of couple you could tell were kind, or at least raised to be, because they were still nodding instead of walking away. He held a Bible close to his chest and a small stack of pamphlets in the other hand, and he spoke with the calm confidence of someone who expected strangers to listen. Even from a distance, I could see the cane. White, with a red tip. Blind. At least that's what I assumed at first. As I walked toward the doors, he seemed to sense me. I don't mean he heard my footsteps, though maybe he did. I mean, it felt like he detected something deeper, like I was loud in a way that wasn't sound, like I carried a smell he could recognize. His posture changed. He straightened, his head tilted slightly, and his face tightened, the way someone's face tightens when they've found what they were looking for. His eyes, behind dark glasses, turned in my direction. As he pushed himself upright from where he'd been leaning, I realized how tall he was. It wasn't just tall, it was wrong tall. The kind of height that makes your brain pause for a second because it doesn't match the setting. He had to be at least 6'8". His body was slender, almost narrow, but it didn't make him look weak. It made him look sharp, like a blade, and there was something else about him that didn't fit with the idea of a harmless preacher outside a store, an air around him that made the hair at the back of my neck lift without me choosing it. I couldn't decide if it was his confidence or the way he stood so still, like he didn't need to shift his weight the way normal people do. When I got closer, I noticed his skin, olive-toned, covered in tattoos. Crosses, Bible verses, symbols layered over one another like prayers carved into flesh. Some of the ink looked old and faded, some of it looked newer, darker. And running down the length of one arm was a scar, long and pale, ending right at the crease of his elbow. It wasn't the kind of scar you get from an accident in the kitchen. It looked like something that had been done to him, not something that just happened. He stopped mid-sentence as he spoke to the couple. The pause was sudden, as if someone had cut his connection to them. The couple didn't waste the opportunity. They mumbled something polite and hurried away, relief written all over their faces. They didn't look back. He didn't look after them. His head stayed turned toward me. Even though he was blind, he moved with purpose. He tapped his cane once, lightly, and then glided toward me like he already knew exactly where I was standing. The cane didn't search. It didn't hesitate. It looked more like a formality than a tool. He stopped directly in front of me and planted his feet like he was blocking a doorway. I tried to angle my body to step around him, but he shifted with me, sidestepping just enough to stay in my path. It wasn't aggressive in a loud way. It was quiet control. Like he wasn't worried about me going anywhere because he'd already decided I wouldn't. He leaned in close. Too close. His head moved slightly from side to side, as though he was listening to the shape of me. His neck arched and bent in a way that didn't look natural, like a bird studying something on the ground. The glasses hid his eyes, but I could feel the attention anyway, heavy and direct. I wouldn't say I looked like someone who wanted to talk. I kept my mouth shut. My shoulders were tense. I'm sure my face wasn't friendly. But people like him don't go after friendly faces. They go after the ones that look tired, the ones that look guilty, the ones that look like they're carrying something they don't know how to set down. His expression was stern, like a teacher about to pull you aside after class. Authoritative, almost accusatory, as if he'd already read the report and he was disappointed in the conclusion. And then he smiled. Not a wide, welcoming smile, not the warm smile you'd expect from someone offering comfort. It was a small change in his face, controlled and practiced, like he was putting a mask on. And the moment he did it, something inside me tightened, because the smile made me feel seen, not in the normal way, in the way you feel when someone placed both hands on my shoulders. His hands were heavy, not just physically heavy, but emotionally heavy, like they carried a force of their own. For a second, I almost felt relief, like the weight on my chest had been moved somewhere else, like he was holding it for me. Then he leaned closer and spoke quietly, so quietly that only I could hear. And that's what made me turn around and go back to my car. That's what made me drive straight to the police station, hands shaking on the wheel, stomach twisting as if my body understood what my mind was refusing to accept. Because he knew. There wasn't any doubt. He didn't hint. He didn't fish for a reaction. He described it. He described my wife's body like he'd seen it himself, like he'd stood in the room and taken his time looking. He described the way she lay, the way her skin had cooled, the way the life had left her. He used words that weren't poetic and weren't dramatic. They were simple, exact details that landed like blows. Then, he spoke about my children. He described them the way they were left in their beds, small and still, the sheets darkening as blood soaked through, dripping down and staining the hardwood floor. He spoke about the gunshot wounds like he was listing facts from a file, like he was reading an inventory of what I'd done. I don't remember breathing. I remember the parking lot lights. I remember the automatic doors opening and closing behind him as shoppers came and went, unaware that my world had stopped. He didn't accuse me with anger. He didn't yell. He didn't call me a monster, even though that would have been easier somehow. Instead, he spoke with something that sounded like empathy, and that made it worse. He talked about the debts, the gambling, the way it starts small, the way it becomes a routine, the way it turns into a quiet panic you live with every day. He said the word collateral like it belonged in the same sentence as a family, like that was a normal way for a mind to justify what it was doing. And the most sickening part was that he didn't sound surprised. He sounded like he understood. He told me humans make mistakes, that it's what we do, what we're known for. He told me forgiveness was possible, even for something like this, but not the kind of forgiveness people beg for in a church, not the kind you whisper to a priest behind a screen. He said if I wanted any hope at all, I had to confess to the authorities. Then, his voice turned colder. No sin goes unpunished, he said. He told me the punishment waiting here, on Earth, would be nothing compared to what the Almighty had planned for child murderers and family annihilators. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't get dramatic. He spoke like someone stating a rule that had always been true and always would be. As he spoke, my blood felt like it was cooling inside my veins. My heart rate climbed higher and higher until it felt like it might crack my ribs from the inside. My stomach rolled. My mouth tasted like metal. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, to get away from him, to pretend this moment wasn't happening. But his hands stayed on my shoulders, and I couldn't move. Not because he was gripping me tightly. Not because he was physically holding me in place. It was something else. Something that felt like gravity had increased around us, like his touch had made the space heavier. When he finally lifted his hands away, the release was so sudden that I almost stumbled. The air felt lighter and sharper, like I'd been underwater and had just surfaced. For a second, the world went still, not quiet, still. Even the cars seemed to move slower. Even the automatic doors looked like they were opening and closing in a different rhythm. I stared at him, shocked, trying to find a normal explanation for what had just happened, trying to force my mind to label him as a lucky guesser, a scammer, someone who'd overheard something. But there was no way. He smiled again, briefly, and then his face settled into something flat. Then, as if he was saying goodbye, he slowly raised his glasses up off his eyes. I expected empty eyes, clouded eyes, anything that fit the story Instead, I saw milk-white pupils, not cataracts, not blindness. They were white, like porcelain, like something artificial, like they didn't belong in a living face. And inside that white, something moved. Fire. It danced and flickered in his eyes, real and bright, the kind of flame that makes you think of heat and smoke, and the smell of burning hair. And behind the fire, or inside it, I heard something I can't explain, without sounding like I'm losing my mind. Screams. Not one scream. Not a few. It sounded like millions, layered together, echoing out of that impossible fire like it was a doorway to a place that never stops hurting. My legs moved before my thoughts did. I turned and walked fast, then faster. Then I was running without realizing it. I got into my car and slammed the door hard enough to hurt my hand. I started the engine and pulled out, not caring if I cut someone off, not caring if I hit a curb. I drove straight to the police station. Now I'm sitting here, writing this down, because I don't know what else to do with it. My hands still feel wrong, like his weight is still on my shoulders. I can still see that smile in my head, controlled and calm, like he was never worried about what I might do next, because he already knew where I was headed. Part of me wants to stay here, inside this building, under these lights, where people with uniforms and name tags can tell me what happens next. Part of me wants to walk back out to my car, leave this parking lot, leave this state, disappear so completely that even my own reflection couldn't find me. But I can't shake his face. I can't stop hearing his voice. I can't get his words to stop rattling around in my mind, turning over and over like something sharp in a locked box. He knew. And now I think it's time other people know too. Story 5. It wasn't that my parents were horrible people. I still hesitate to call them abusive in the strict legal way that word gets used, but I also can't pretend I had a happy childhood. The house never felt warm. It never felt safe in the way a home is supposed to. It felt like a place where time passed, bills got paid when they got paid, and everyone just tried to survive the week. My dad worked for the State Road Works Department when I was little. He was gone most of the day and came home worn out, the kind of tired that makes a person quiet and sharp at the same time. He didn't hit me often, not really. A few times, sure, and spankings happened here and there, like they did in a lot of families. But what hurt more was how he acted like I didn't exist. When he was home, he wanted his chair, his TV, his beer. He wanted to sink into the cushion and turn his brain off. If I talked too much or asked for help or needed attention, his eyes would go flat like I was interrupting something important, even though he was just watching whatever happened to be on. My mom managed a grocery store. She worked hard, I'll give her that. She had this idea in her head that if she pushed enough, if she stayed late enough, if she always said yes, she would eventually become general manager. That dream sat on her shoulders like a heavy bag she carried everywhere. I don't doubt she loved me. I really don't. But love doesn't do much when the person who loves you is never home long enough to show it. Most nights, it was just me. A pile of dishes in the sink, the smell of old trash in the corner, and the low hum of the refrigerator in the dark. That's why I think I survived the way I did. Because even though I didn't have much from my parents, I had something else. A third parent, in a way. Not the kind you put on a family tree, but something that filled the empty space where care should have been. I don't remember exactly when it began. My earliest memories are blurry, like old photos left out in the sun. But I do remember being very small, barely more than a toddler, lying in bed and hearing something speak to me from the darkness. It wasn't loud. It wasn't scary. It was soft, like someone trying not to wake the rest of the house. It felt warm, too. Not warm like body heat, but warm like a blanket pulled up under your chin. I was never afraid of the dark, and I think that was why. Other kids would talk about monsters under the bed, and I would listen, confused, because the dark never felt like an enemy to me. If anything, it felt like company. Sometimes I'd lie awake, wishing my mom would come in. I wanted her to kiss my forehead, or read me a book, or even just stand in the doorway for a second and ask how my day was. I didn't need some big speech. I just wanted proof that I mattered. And when that didn't happen, when the house stayed quiet and no footsteps came down the hall, that presence would arrive. It would sing under its breath, or hum, or speak in a gentle way that made my chest loosen like I'd been holding my breath all day. It never touched me. That part is important. I never felt a hand on my shoulder, never felt fingers brush my hair. It didn't need to. Just the feeling that something was there, something paying attention, was enough. Our house at night had a certain look to it. We didn't keep up with cleaning. Nobody did. My parents were busy in their own ways, and when they were home, they didn't have the energy for anything except collapsing into themselves. That meant the mess grew slowly, like it was alive. Laundry piles, old plates, half-full trash bags tied shut, and then forgotten. The floor wasn't really a floor so much as a set of narrow paths between clutter. In the dark, those piles didn't look like piles. They looked like shapes. They looked like crouched things. Sometimes, in the corner of my room, a stack of clothes would seem too tall, too hunched, like it had shoulders. A black trash bag would look like a head. A leaning tower of boxes could become a giant sitting quietly, waiting. I wasn't afraid of darkness itself, but I was afraid of what the darkness could turn normal objects into when my brain started running wild. Whenever that fear rose up, whenever I stared too long and my imagination began to twist, the presence would come, and the voice would speak, calm and steady. It would tell me I was safe. It would tell me those things couldn't hurt me. It would tell me I mattered. I didn't name it right away. I was probably 5 or 6 before it became something I could label. Before that, it was just the voice in the dark, the comfort that arrived when nobody else did. But eventually, I started calling it the voice, like a title, like it was something official, something real. I know how stories like this usually go. I've seen enough movies, read enough books, heard enough creepy tales online. There's always a comforting presence that turns out to be a demon, a parasite, something that feeds on you. The sweet voice becomes the trap. The help becomes the hook. But that wasn't what it felt like with the voice. It didn't tempt me. It didn't ask me to hurt anyone. It didn't demand secrets or favors. It didn't try to push me toward anything except feeling okay. And it didn't even speak in just one voice. That's another thing people might not understand. It spoke in many voices. Sometimes it sounded old, sometimes young. Sometimes it sounded like a man, sometimes like a woman, sometimes like a chorus that didn't match any human throat. But the message was always the same. You have value. You're loved. You deserve better than what you're getting. And it only came when the lights were off. That became a rule. The lamp on meant quiet. The overhead light meant nothing but my own thoughts. But when the room went dark, when shadows settled into place, I could feel it gather somewhere at the edge of what little light leaked in from the hall. I never saw its true shape. Sometimes, in the deep corners, it would form into something roughly human, a darker patch of dark shaped like a person standing still. But I never saw a face, never saw eyes. I only felt the attention, like being watched in a protective way. As I got older, the voice didn't just comfort me, it started helping me. The first time it did something practical, something that crossed the line from emotional support into real-world results. I was in 5th grade. I had a science test the next day. It was worth a lot, the kind of percentage that could ruin your grade if was sitting at a small desk shoved into the corner of my room, my knees almost touching the underside because the space was so tight. My room was barely bigger than a closet, and it didn't have windows. It always felt like a box. When the door was shut, it felt like the air didn't move. I had the textbook open, and I was trying so hard to memorize what I needed. I wasn't stupid. I just couldn't hold on to facts I didn't care about. My head would fill up and then empty out, like I had holes in my brain. But if you asked me about the stuff I loved, I could talk forever. I could name every Pokemon without thinking. I could tell you which episodes of Naruto I'd replayed a dozen times. I could remember lines from movies. But science terms and definitions, they slid right off me. The lamp on my desk made a small circle of light. Everything outside that circle was dim. The corners of the room were shadowed, and I felt the voice gather in the farthest corner it could find, like it respected the boundary of the light. I heard that faint sound that always came with it, like tiny whispering against carpet, like something brushing the floor with 1,000 soft points. Even then, I smiled. It wasn't a scary sound to me. It was familiar. "What's wrong, Daniel?" it asked. My name, spoken like that, still makes me pause when I think about it. My parents said my name when they were annoyed, when they were calling me to do something, when they were blaming me for something. The voice said it like I mattered. "I have this test tomorrow," I whispered, like speaking too loud might break the moment. "It's worth 30% of my grade, and I can't make any of it stay in my head. I try, and it just doesn't stick." The voice went quiet for a moment, not in a cold way, more like it was thinking, like several minds were talking quietly to each other somewhere I couldn't see. Then it spoke again, and it sounded almost pleased. "Go to bed, Daniel. Leave the book open on the desk and turn the light off." I stared at the pages. "But I need to study. Let us worry about that," it said. "You rest. We will help you tomorrow." That was new. The word us. The word we. It made my skin prickle. But the feeling wasn't fear. It was the strange awareness that the voice wasn't a single thing. It never had been. I wanted to argue. I wanted to keep pushing myself until my eyes burned and my brain turned to mush. But the voice had never led me wrong. It had never made me feel unsafe. So I did what it told me. I left the book open to the pages I needed, turned off the lamp, and climbed into bed. The room fell into darkness, deep and complete because there were no windows. The voice stayed in the corner like a guard. It hummed and sang softly until my thoughts slowed down and sleep took me. The next morning, I woke up with sharp pain in my ear. It was sudden, like someone had jabbed a finger inside and twisted. I sat up and rubbed my ear, thinking maybe I was getting an ear infection. But it wasn't the deep ache of sickness. It was a pressure, a presence. It felt like something was inside, lodged in there, not moving, not letting go. I tried to shake it out. I scratched at my ear. I even pulled at it like that would help. Nothing changed. The pain stayed, steady and annoying, and it came with a weird feeling that I couldn't explain, like my ear wasn't empty anymore. I went through breakfast like that. My parents barely looked at me. Mom was rushing around, already dressed for work, and Dad was sitting with his coffee like he was barely awake. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody noticed anything. On the bus, I tried to cram. I read notes. I reread pages in my mind. But the closer we got to school, the more the pressure in my ear distracted me. It was hard to focus. I was already stressed about the test, and now I was worried I was going to be sick on top of it. Then, right as we pulled into the school lot, I heard a voice inside my ear, clear as if someone's mouth was pressed right against it. "Don't worry, everything will be okay." I almost jumped out of my seat. My hand flew to my ear, my heart hammered. For a second, I thought I'd lost it, that the stress had finally snapped something in my brain. In a whisper, barely moving my lips, I asked, "Is that you?" "Yes, Daniel." It was the voice, but closer than it had ever been. It wasn't filling the room. It wasn't coming from a corner. It was right there in me, intimate and impossible. It told me it had what I needed. It told me it could help me pass the test if I wanted it to. Of course I wanted it. I wasn't proud, not when my future felt like it depended on a stupid 5th grade science score. I whispered thank you. And when the test was placed on my desk later, and I stared at the questions with sweat on my palms, the voice gave me answers. Not in a magical lightning bolt way. It was more like information rising up in my head, organized and clear. I would read a question, and before panic could set in, I would hear the answer, spoken softly in my ear. I filled in the bubbles. I wrote the short responses. I turned the test in with shaking hands. When grades came back, I'd passed. Not amazingly, but enough. Enough to keep me in the safe middle. Enough to avoid summer school. Enough that my parents didn't yell at me for failing, which felt like its own kind of victory. After that, the voice helped me more. It didn't do it every day, and it didn't do it for everything. But whenever I was anxious about something important, I started to wake up with that same feeling in my ear. That pressure, that presence. It would stay through the day, offering quiet guidance, and then it would be gone after the moment passed, like it had finished its job. It helped me through tests. It helped me through presentations when I had to stand in front of the class and my throat felt locked. It helped me when older kids tried to corner me in the hallway and my mind went blank with fear. It didn't make me a hero. It didn't turn me into someone I wasn't. It just helped me get through. It was like having someone beside you whispering, "Keep going. You can do this." Most of the time, though, the voice wasn't about school or social stuff. It was there for the harder things, the private things. When my mom missed my birthday one year, missed it completely, didn't even call until late at night, and even then sounded rushed, the voice stayed with me in the dark and told me I deserved better. It didn't insult her. It didn't rage. It just stated it like a fact, like it didn't want me to grow up thinking crumbs were a meal. When my dad, in one of his bitter moods, told me he wished I had never been born, I went to my room and shut the door and tried not to cry. The voice came immediately, wrapping my thoughts in something steady. It told me there were those who cared for me. It told me he was wrong. It told me the world was bigger than my house. When my parents left for days at a time, Dad disappearing into his own habits, Mom taking extra shifts or doing whatever she did to cope, and I was alone, the voice kept me company. It sang me to sleep. It kept the dark feeling less empty. It was there for me until I was almost 18. And then everything changed, all at once. The night I left home was the same night my father died. By then, I had a job. Nothing impressive, just a place that paid enough to give me a little freedom. I'd come home smelling like grease and cleaning products, my hands dry from soap, my feet sore from standing. I would eat something if there was anything edible in the house, and then collapse into bed because I had to wake up for school and do it all again. A lot of people might say that wasn't much of a teenage life. No sports, no parties, no friends hanging out. But honestly, I preferred being out of the house. Work gave me a reason to be somewhere else. It gave me a place where people knew my name and expected me to show up. It gave me an excuse not to sit in the gloom of that living room, surrounded by clutter and stale air, listening to my parents exist in the same space without really being family. Nobody ever wanted to come over, and I didn't blame them. The outside of the house looked normal enough, but inside was like a storage unit that had given up. The windows were blocked by boxes and heavy curtains that never got washed. There were barely any lights on because bulbs burned out and no one replaced them. The paths from one room to the next were narrow and dirty, carved through piles like trails through a forest. And during that last year, things got worse. My dad had been out of work for months. His unemployment ran out. He started drinking even more than before, like it was his full-time job. Beer bottles multiplied. Wine boxes sat in corners. He spent his days on the couch, staring at the TV, complaining about everything, blaming everyone. The house smelled like old alcohol and sour trash. My mom, under all that pressure, developed a shopping habit. It wasn't just occasional, it was constant. Bags and boxes showed up like a flood. She'd bring things home and drop them where she stood, and they'd stay there. A lot of the stuff never got used. It would sit in its packaging until dust coated it, and then it would just become another obstacle to step over. That night, I came home around 10:30. The house was quiet in the way it always was, but not peaceful. I opened the front door and squeezed through the clutter, the plastic bags rustling, the cardboard shifting. I expected to see my dad in his usual spot on the couch. Instead, he was sitting at the dining room table. The table itself was mostly empty, which was unusual. Usually it was buried. But he'd cleared a space in front of him, like he was waiting for something to appear. His posture was stiff, his shoulders raised. He stared at the tabletop like he expected dinner to crawl out of the wood. I knew what that meant. Mom wasn't home. She was either working late or out shopping. Dad had expected food to be made for him, and it hadn't happened. There were 5 or 6 empty beer bottles on the table already. When he looked up at me, his eyes were red and wet. I could tell immediately there was no winning this. "Where's my dinner?" he asked. I stepped inside, pushing the door shut behind me. The movement knocked into something, and a couple bottles clinked and rolled, making the sound louder than it should have been in the still house. I swallowed and tried to keep my voice calm. "I just got home," I said. "I didn't cook anything." Obviously, he snapped as if I'd insulted him. "So where is it? You and your mother are gone all day, and I'm just here by myself. The least you could do is make sure I don't starve." I started toward the kitchen, more out of habit than agreement. I was exhausted. I just wanted to make something simple and go to bed. But something in him shifted, like a switch flipping inside his head. He stood up so fast the bottles shook. His hands hit the table and left clean patches on the dirty wood, and he stepped toward me, unsteady but angry. His face was flushed, and his breath smelled like a distillery. "I feed you," he said, voice rising. "I clothe you. I put a roof over your head. And you can't even make sure I have dinner? What good are you? You don't provide anything. You're nothing but a drain." He pointed toward the front door with a hand that trembled. "Get out." It wasn't the first time he'd said it. He'd threatened it before, plenty of times. Usually I'd start packing a bag and then find him passed out, and things would reset by morning like a bad dream nobody talked about. But this time, the look in his face was different. There was determination in it, and something meaner underneath. "It's the middle of the night," I said, trying to reason with him. "I have school tomorrow. I just worked 8 hours. I just want to go to bed," and his hand hit the side of my head so fast I barely saw it coming. The slap snapped my face to the side and made my ears ring. My eyes watered from the shock. He stood over me with his fist clenched like he was ready to do worse. "I didn't ask," he said. "I want you gone. If you won't leave, I'll make you leave." I didn't think I could fight him. He was taller than me, stronger than me, even drunk. His arms were thick with work muscle from years of labor, even if he wasn't working now. If he really decided to beat me, I knew I couldn't stop him. So I dropped, instinct taking over, curling into myself on the floor like an animal, arms up, head down, trying to protect what I could. I waited for the blows. 1 second. 2. 10. Nothing hit. At first, I thought he'd come to his senses. I thought maybe he'd step back, maybe he'd realize what he was doing. Maybe, somehow, the anger had drained out and left him ashamed. But when I looked up, I understood immediately that it wasn't that. My father was frozen in place, half in the living room and half toward the kitchen. His body was tense, like he was struggling against something invisible. His arm was raised slightly, and he looked at his own hand with confusion, like it wasn't obeying him. That's when I saw the darkness around it. It wasn't normal shadow. It was deeper, thicker, like oil spilled in water. It moved in a slow, smooth way, wrapping around his hand and wrist. It didn't spill into the light. It avoided it carefully, staying where the hallway lamp didn't quite reach. My dad tried to pull his arm back, tried to step away. His mouth opened like he was going to curse, but no words came out at first. The darkness climbed higher, sliding up his forearm like a living thing. Then, with a sudden pull, it yanked him backward, away from me, into the dark of the kitchen. He started screaming. It didn't sound like anger anymore. It sounded like panic, like pain, like a grown man who had always believed he was in control, suddenly realizing he wasn't. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. My whole body locked up. I watched him disappear into the kitchen shadows like he'd been swallowed by the house itself. Then I heard struggling, a heavy thud, another. Wet sounds mixed with his screams, and that made my stomach turn. I didn't know what was happening in there, but it wasn't just a fight. It was something worse, something that made my mind refuse to picture it. And then, under the fear, a thought surfaced. The voice. This had to be the voice. It was the only thing in my life that belonged to the dark like that. The only presence that moved in shadows without fear. My fear shifted, twisted into something else. If the voice was doing this to my father, what did that mean? Had it always been capable of this? Had it been in my house all these years, not just comforting me, but watching everything? Still, another feeling rose up too, complicated and ugly. Relief, a guilty kind of relief that made me hate myself for even feeling it. His screams grew weaker, softer, like he was being dragged farther away. Then they changed. They became wet, choked, like he was trying to breathe through something he couldn't. I pushed myself to my feet, legs shaking. I moved toward the kitchen, slowly, like stepping toward the edge of a cliff. The hallway felt colder. The air smelled like old food and beer and something sharp, something alive. When I reached the doorway, I could barely see. The kitchen was mostly dark, just a faint glow from a small appliance light. My father was on the floor, and something hunched over him. It looked almost human in shape, like a person crouched low. The outline was made of darkness so thick it seemed solid, and it shifted as if it were breathing. Without thinking, without planning, I reached for the switch and turned on the light. The moment the kitchen filled with harsh yellow brightness, the shape reacted like it had been burned. It didn't just step back, it fell apart. The human-like shadow melted into a pile of moving insects, a mass of bodies that tumbled over one another. Cockroaches. So many that for a split second my brain refused to accept what I was seeing. They were stacked together in the rough shape of a person, like a horrible statue made of living pieces. They turned as if the pile itself could look at me. Then the roaches scattered away from the light, rushing for cover. They slipped under the refrigerator, under cabinets, into cracks along the baseboard, into any slice of darkness they could find. The sound of them moving was like dry leaves being poured out. A rushing whisper. They left my father on the linoleum. He was still. His eyes stared without focus. His mouth hung slightly open. And the roaches, they weren't just around him. They were coming out of him. They poured from his mouth, his nose, his ears. They crawled from under his shirt collar, from his sleeves, from his waistband. It was like his body had been used as a hiding place, like the inside of him had become their nest. I stumbled back, choking on my own breath. My stomach heaved, and for a moment I thought I would throw up right there. My hands shook so hard I couldn't even close them into fists. Then I heard it. A chorus of voices, soft and familiar, calling my name from the places the roaches had fled into. Daniel, 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 Daniel. Not angry, not mocking, not threatening, almost gentle. Like it wanted me to come closer, like it wanted to explain. That was the worst part. If it had sounded evil, if it had sounded like a monster from a movie, I could have hated it easily. I could have told myself it had tricked me. But it sounded like the same presence that had sung me to sleep when I was alone. The same thing that had told me I mattered when nobody else did. I backed away again. My heel hit something and I almost fell. The voices called my name a few more times, still soft, still patient. I didn't stay to hear what it wanted. I ran. I bolted out of the kitchen, down the hall, past the mess, past the table with the beer bottles, and through the front door. I didn't grab a jacket. I didn't grab my backpack. I didn't stop to think about money or school or anything else. I just ran into the night air like it could wash the house off me. I kept running until my lungs burned. I didn't stop until I reached a bus station a couple blocks away, where there were lights and benches and a sense of public space that made me feel less alone. My hands were shaking so much, I almost dropped my phone. I called the closest thing I had to a friend, a guy from the restaurant where I worked. We weren't best friends, not really, but he'd always been decent to me. When he answered, I tried to explain without sounding insane. I told him there was a situation at home, that I couldn't go back, that I needed somewhere to stay. He didn't ask too many questions. Maybe he heard something in my voice. Maybe he guessed my home life wasn't great. He told me to come over. I slept on his couch for a while, a few months at least, long enough to find my footing, long enough to stop waking up in the middle of the night expecting to hear a chorus whispering in the corner. Even in his apartment, in the dark, I sometimes thought I could feel the voice nearby, like it had followed me. But if it did, it stayed quiet. No humming, no comfort, just silence. My mom called me, of course. At first it was frantic. She wanted to know where I was. She wanted to know what happened to my dad. She said he was dead. She said the police were asking questions. She said it didn't make sense. I told her the only thing I could. I said he was like that when I got home. I didn't give details. I didn't mention shadows. I didn't mention roaches. I didn't mention a voice that had raised me in the dark. She asked me why I wouldn't come back. Her tone had this edge to it, like she thought I was being dramatic, like she thought I was punishing her. I'm not living there anymore, I told her. She went quiet, and in that silence I felt something heavy pass between us. I think she knew there was more. Maybe she could hear it in my breathing. Maybe she realized I'd seen something in that house that I couldn't unsee. I kept couch surfing after that, moving between a couple places, always careful not to stay too long, always trying to be more grateful than needy. Eventually, my mom used the life insurance payout to buy a new place, a smaller house, cleaner, with actual light coming through the windows. She invited me to move in, and I did, partly because I needed stability and partly because I didn't want to abandon her completely, even after everything. The money was enough that she finally got counseling for her shopping. The new house never filled up the way the old one had. She started throwing things away. She started making space. It was like she'd been living underwater for years and had finally come up for air. I still work at the same restaurant. And my old house sits on the route I take to get there. I pass it sometimes without thinking, just driving with my mind on the day ahead. But every now and then, usually when the sky is dark and the streetlights make long shadows, I glance at it and feel my stomach tighten. Sometimes I almost think I see a figure in one of the windows. Not a clear shape, not a person standing there in full detail, just a darker patch behind the glass, like something is watching from inside. Like it's looking for me. I don't know what the voice truly was. I don't know if it was one thing or many. I don't know if it loved me the way a person loves, or if it simply recognized a lonely child and decided to keep him alive. I don't know if it protected me because it cared, or because it had claimed me in some way I never understood. Maybe, if I'd stayed, it would have asked for something in return. Maybe it was always building toward that moment. Maybe my dad was simply in its way, and I just happened to benefit from its attention. All I know for sure is this. It lived in the dark corners of that garbage-filled house. It spoke to me when nobody else did. It helped me when I thought I would drown in fear or failure, and when it finally showed itself in the brightest kitchen light, it turned out not to be a single shadow at all, but a body made of crawling hunger and patience. I'm grateful, I'm terrified, I'm both at the same time, and I will never go back there to find out what it wanted next. Story 6. My siblings were sick. Cass woke me up one morning, coughing so hard he was crying into his blankets. It wasn't a normal cough, the kind you get with a cold. It sounded sharp and violent, like his body was trying to force something out. Each burst ended with this horrible barking noise that made my skin prickle. Even half asleep, I knew something was wrong. Mom came rushing into our room when she heard him. She didn't ask many questions. She just scooped him up like he was still a little kid and carried him downstairs. Kaz tried to keep that brave, big brother attitude, even while he was shaking in her arms. I'm fine, he kept forcing out between coughs. I'm fine. Lavender, our sister, stayed as far away from him as she could, shuffling back like his sickness was something she could catch just by looking at him. Zach, the youngest, watched with wide eyes like it was a scary movie he wasn't allowed to see. Kaz didn't look fine. His face was paper white, and there were dark shadows under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. His lips looked dry and cracked. At breakfast, he couldn't eat at all. Every time he tried, another coughing fit would hit, and he'd splutter cereal everywhere. I pretended not to notice the small specks of red in his bowl. I told myself it was probably strawberries. Or maybe he bit his tongue. Anything normal. Mom put a glass of orange juice in front of him like it was a cure. Cass, she said gently, did you do your homework yesterday? No, he croaked, then coughed again so hard his shoulders jerked. I was with Mrs. Orville's ducks. Mom sighed and ruffled his hair. Sweetheart, you know you can't keep playing with the neighbor's ducks. I wasn't playing with them, Cass muttered. Another cough exploded out of him, and a spray of cereal landed on my own bowl. Suddenly, I wasn't hungry anymore. I was comforting Jessie, he added, voice rough. My favorite. Comforting her? I frowned. Why? Lavender shoved him before he could answer. Can you stop coughing? She snapped. Your gross cooties are going to infect my Choco Flakes. Leave him alone, Zach giggled, because Zach laughed when he was nervous. Cass could be dying. Lavender grabbed an apple and threw it at Zach's head. Don't say that. Then she turned to me with her eyes wide and shiny. If Cass is dying, she whispered, what if we're already infected with his disease? Cass was sick enough that he could barely sit up straight, but he still managed a weak smile. He leaned toward Lavender's bowl and coughed right over her cereal on purpose. Lavender, as usual, freaked out. She shoved her chair back hard enough to bump into Zach, and Zach shoved her in return until she nearly fell. Mom told us to stop, her voice sharp the way it got when she wanted control back. But when Cass collapsed into another coughing fit, Lavender's anger softened into something else. Her face changed, like she didn't want to admit she was scared. She left the table without a word. Zach quietly scooted his chair farther away from Cass. Mom noticed and frowned, but she didn't say anything about it. She was focused on Cass, on the coughing, on the red specks, on the way he couldn't catch his breath. "Your brother is not dying," Mom said, like if she said it firmly enough, it would be true. "He's just a little sick." Cass stayed home from school that day. When I got home after classes, I expected the house to feel normal again. Maybe quiet because Cass would be resting. Maybe smell like soup. Instead, I heard it the second I stepped inside. Coughing. Not just Cass. A sharp, ugly mix of coughing coming from more than one throat. Lavender, Zach, and Cass, all of them hacking at once. It sounded like dogs barking in a tight space. It didn't stop. It didn't even slow down. It kept rising and falling like waves. I stood in the entryway, frozen, until I finally forced myself to take my shoes off. My hands felt clumsy. My stomach twisted like I'd swallowed something sour. Mom appeared with a smile that didn't match her eyes. Her face looked tired, but not the normal tired. Her eyes were shadowed, like she'd been crying or not sleeping. "Hey, sweetie," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost careful, as if the walls might listen. "From now on, Hannah," she said, "I want you to hold on to this." She pressed something cool into my palm, a crystal, smooth and clear, with a sharp point at one end. It caught the light from the hallway and threw it back in a tiny rainbow. "Keep holding on to it, all right?" Mom whispered, "It's magic." I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. My throat tightened and my stomach rolled harder. Did just breathing the air in this house mean I was going to get sick too? I took a deep breath in and refused to exhale, like holding it might protect me. My chest burned. When my lungs finally forced the air out, I slapped my sleeve over my mouth like a mask, panting into the fabric. "Mom," I whispered, "are they?" I didn't finish the question. I didn't even know how to form it. Are they dying? Are they going to stop breathing? Is it my turn next? Mom grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the living room. Her grip was tight. Not painful, but close. She didn't answer. She pushed me into the living room and shut the door in my face before I could say anything else. I stood there for a second, staring at the closed door, then sat down on the couch because my legs felt weak. The TV was already on. Cartoon Network played bright colors and cheerful voices that didn't match what was happening in the rest of the house. It felt like the TV was trying to pretend the world was still normal. I watched cartoons, but I wasn't really watching. I kept flinching every time one of my siblings coughed so hard it sounded like they were choking. I turned the volume up louder and louder until it was almost painful, trying to drown them out. But the coughing still cut through it, sharp and wet and wrong. I rolled the crystal around in my fist because Mom told me to hold it. It felt cold no matter how long I held it. Every time I heard one of them cry out that they couldn't breathe, my stomach clenched and I felt sick. It went on for hours. At some point I started crying too. Quietly at first, then harder. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the sound still got through my bones. By the time the door finally opened again, it was pitch black outside. Mom stood there in the doorway like a shadow. "Your siblings are okay," she said. "They're sleeping." Relief rushed through me so fast I almost laughed. I jumped up, a smile pulling at my face without permission. "Can I see them?" I asked. Mom folded her arms. "Not yet," she said. "I've been instructed that they must rest." "Instructed?" I repeated, but she didn't respond to that. She was staring at me like she was deciding something. "Did they see a doctor?" I asked, and the hope in my voice surprised even me. Mom stepped forward. I reached out automatically to hug her because I needed something solid, something safe. Before I could, her hand snapped out and struck my cheek. The slap made my ears ring. My head turned. I stumbled back, my hand flying up to my face. The sting burned like heat. Of course not. Mom's lip curled as if I'd insulted her. Sweetie, do you really think I would trust my children with the slaves of big pharmaceuticals? I stared at her, shocked. I'd never seen her look like that before, like her anger was coming from somewhere deep and old. They're fine, she continued. I've been looking after them all day. There's no need for a doctor. My cheek throbbed. My throat felt tight like I couldn't swallow. Mom guided me upstairs, still gripping my wrist, moving fast. At Lavender's room, she opened the door just enough for me to peek inside. Lavender lay propped on pillows, ghost white, sweat shining on her forehead. Her hair stuck to her temples. Her lips looked darker than they should have, almost purple. Her breaths were shallow and shaky, like she had to fight for each one. Mom had placed special healing crystals all over her. They were arranged on the blanket and woven through her hair like decorations. In the dim light, they looked more like something from a ritual than something meant to help. See? Mom whispered. Her fever is very slowly coming down. That's what God told me. I nodded even though fear was building behind my ribs. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want another slap. I didn't want her to look at me like that again. Is she really getting better? I asked softly, rubbing my sore cheek. The sting was still there, as if her handprint had stayed on my skin. I noticed Cass's door was shut. I didn't like the silence behind it. Silence felt worse than coughing, because silence could mean anything. What about my brothers? I asked. They're okay, Hannah, Mom said quickly, ushering me back into the hallway. Cass and Zach are sleeping. Stop worrying about them. They'll be back to their normal selves tomorrow. She pushed me into my room like I was the one who needed to rest. Then she closed my door. I lay in bed staring into the darkness. I kept hearing coughing in my head even when the house was quiet. I held the crystal until my fingers cramped. I tried to sleep anyway because I didn't know what else to do. I woke up to Mom screaming, not shouting, screaming like something had broken inside her. I heard sobbing too, loud and ugly, the kind you can't control. It came from the hallway, close to Lavender's room. Mom? I called out, and my own voice sounded rough. My throat felt scratchy and dry. I coughed into my hand. The cough surprised me. It was small, but it was there. I wiped my palm on my shirt without thinking. The hallway was cold under my feet. I found Mom curled up on the floor outside my sister's door, knees pulled to her chest like she was trying to make herself smaller. Crystals were scattered around her, some in her hands, some on the carpet like dropped beads. I reached for the doorknob. Before I could turn it, Mom shot up and slammed the door shut with her body, blocking it. She didn't say a word. Her face was wet with tears, and her hands shook as she grabbed her crystals again, clutching them like they were the only thing keeping her standing. I didn't need her to tell me Lavender was still sick. I could feel it in the air, in the way Mom was shaking, in the way the house seemed to hold its breath. I stepped back, and another cough burst out of me, harder this time. It scraped my throat on the way out. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I really need to go to school. Mom didn't answer. She just stared at the door like she was guarding it from me, or guarding me from what was behind it. So I went anyway. I got dressed, slowly. My hands felt strange, like they didn't fully belong to me. I grabbed my backpack and left the house. The morning air outside felt cold and clean, and for a second I wanted to cry just because it felt normal to breathe again. At school, Leela, my best friend, ran up to me and grabbed my hand. because smiling was easier than thinking. "Sure," I said, and passed him the bottle. As I handed it over, I coughed. It came out louder than I expected, sharp enough that a couple kids turned to look. I swallowed the embarrassment, forced my face back into something normal. "Here you go," I told Noah. Noah took a long drink, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and grinned at me. "Thanks." I watched him smile, and something cold settled in my stomach, heavier than fear, because it felt like understanding. I wasn't just sick. I was early.